previous lessons, I'm going to start a little bit earlier in the chapter than the book does, and talk a little bit about leading up to the passages in the book. So I want to start off in Numbers chapter 16 with verse 1. Korah, son of Izar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and certain Reubenites, Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, son of Caleb, became insolent and rose up against Moses. With them were 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders who had been appointed members of the council. So the first thing we see here is that one of the people that we're talking about today are the Levites. So one of the Pauls is talking about who are the Levites. Where did they come from? So where did the Levites originate?
Levi's fourth son, the third son of
Jacob. The Levite is the third son of Jacob and Leah, right? The Levites, in general, that particular tribe, so Jacob had 12 sons. His sons were the tribes of Israel. The Levites had religious and political responsibility. And so it was their job to do the work of the synagogue and all the different things related to religion and in some in politics as well. In return for their work, they received their wages from what? The taxes of the people, the tithes, right? So the Levites did the religious work, the political work, and they received their wages from tithes rather than other means. So Levi himself, the third son of Jacob, was the father of Kohath. Levi's three sons, Gershon, Kohath, and Merrell, had their descendants named after them as the different clans of Levi. So there were three sub-clans in Levi. The one we're going to be talking about today is the Kohath clan. He had four sons. Two of his sons were Izar and Amram. So Amram and Jochebed were the father and mother of Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. Interesting fact about Jochebed, she was Moses' mother and his what? Great aunt, I think. So Jochebed was the daughter of Levi as well. This was still common practice at this time. It was later forbidden by the law of Moses. So Amram's brother, Izar, had a son named Korah, and that's who our lesson focuses on today primarily. Moses and his first cousin, Korah. So the other two people that we see here, there's actually a third one in the translation that I read. Dathan and Abiram, the descendants of Reuben. Who is Reuben? Reuben's another son of Jacob. He's actually the first son of Jacob. And so Dathan and Abiram, descendants of the oldest son of Jacob. So we can make kind of two assumptions here. What we're going to see in this lesson is that they basically come up and rebel against Moses and Aaron. I'll read verse 3 first. They came up as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly?" So we can make one of two assumptions here, I believe. The first one we can make is that Dathan and Abiram they were the ones that initiated the revolt. And they needed the help of somebody that was closer to Moses. So they went and enlisted the help of Korah, who was Moses' first cousin. They wanted somebody as a spokesperson who was closer to Moses, who knew him better, who could be their spokesperson for the revolt. The flip side of that, we can make the assumption that Korah wanted to revolt, but he was worried that he couldn't do it by himself, and so he wanted to get somebody who maybe had a little bit more power than he did. So he went to somebody from the tribe of Jacob's first son, looking for somebody with that birthright, basically, that had more power based on birthright. So we can either assume that one recruited the other recruited him. Either way, these group of men managed to round up 250 more men. Not just men, but what? What does it say? They're community leaders. So it's not just random men, they actually go get well-known community leaders to come up and revolt basically against Moses and Aaron. One of the questions I had here that I don't really have an answer to I'm just curious if any of these 250 men who were well-known community leaders were any of the 70 elders that God placed His Spirit on in this crowd. Were they any of those 70 people in this 250? I don't know that we know that. Anybody know the answer to that? I think there's a possibility that that's the case, but we don't see anything to show us either way. So continuing on with verse 4, verses 4 through 11. When Moses heard this, he fell face down. And then he said to Korah and all his followers, "In the morning the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy. And he will have that person come near him. The man he chooses he will cause to come near him. You, Korah, and all your followers are to do this. Take censers or bowls, and tomorrow put fire and incense in them before the Lord. The man the Lord chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far." Moses also said to Korah, "Now listen, you Levites. Isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the Israelite community and brought you near himself to do the work of the Lord's tabernacle and to stand before the community and minister to them? He has brought you and all your fellow Levites near himself. But now you are trying to get the priesthood too. It is against the Lord that you and all your followers have banded together. Who is Aaron that you should grumble against him?" So it appears to me that this group of rebels basically will split into possibly at least two tribes, because what we see is Moses addresses Korah and the Levites first. So I don't know if they're physically split up or what, but he's addressing the Levite clan before he addresses the other rebels. So I don't know if there were 250 rebels that were Levites and just the 3 Reubenites that came to help. But we know that there are at least kind of 2 segregations there. So Moses was able to speak directly to Korah and his followers. He tells them basically that their banding together was against the Lord. And I think it's interesting what he points out. He says, "Who is Aaron that you should grumble against him?" So he doesn't say, "Who is Aaron and who am I?" He says, "Who is Aaron that you should grumble against him?" And we've talked about Aaron in previous lessons. What did we find out in the last few lessons about Aaron when we talked about him? What is? He's easily persuaded. He's a follower. Aaron is one that basically just goes along with whatever's going on. He's the one that built the golden calf for him when Moses went up on Mount Sinai. He's the one that went along with his sister Merrell when she tried to oppose Moses. So why should they grumble against Aaron? He's obviously just a spokesperson. So what Moses is doing is setting them straight that their beef is with God. Their beef is not with Aaron or even Moses himself. Continuing on verses 12 through 21. I'm actually going to read this out of the book. Translation. "And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab. But they said, 'We will not come up. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you should keep acting like a prince over us? Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up.' And then Moses was very angry, and he said to the Lord, 'Do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I hurt one of them.' And Moses said to Korah, 'Tomorrow you and all your company be present before the Lord, you and they, as well as Aaron. Let each take his censer and put incense in it. And each of you bring his censer before the Lord, 250 censers, both you and Aaron, each with his censer.' So every man took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and stood at the door of the tabernacle of meeting with Moses and Aaron. And Korah gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And then the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. So this part, maybe I shouldn't, but I find this part a little bit comical. I think there's some irony there that Korah, Dathan, and Abiram decide to rebel against their leader. And so they come up to Moses. They're so determined to overturn him. They gather up 250 community leaders, all this support that they have. And they come to Moses and say, who do you think you are to put yourself before the Lord's assembly? We're all holy. We're all God's people. Who do you think you are? And Moses basically turns around and he scolds them. And he says, fine, if you want to rebel, here's what you must do. And they just do what he says. So they turn around and even in their rebellion, they still follow Moses' commands. So they gathered all these men, they come to him real strong, and then Moses says, well, here, you got to do this. Okay, so they come back the next day. Thought that was a little ironic, a little funny. I'm not clear on whether Dathan and Abiram took part in the assembly. I don't know if anybody else knows that or can tell that. I kind of thought it was one way and then kept reading and read back and forth and thought it was another way. So I'm not sure if they were part of the assembly or if it talks about where they said they wouldn't come up, that they did actually just leave the rebellion and not come up to do what Moses said. Either way, they were leaders in assembling 250 people. An interesting side note about them, Genesis chapter 49, when Jacob is blessing his sons just before he dies, his words for Reuben are, turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel. So it's interesting to note that no prophet, no judge, no king came from the tribe of Reuben after that. So Dathan and Abiram were not going to be the exception. They weren't going to be ones that could rise up and come into power because it would go against what Jacob said to their forefather Reuben. Any other thoughts on that before we continue? So the last verse in the passage, verse 22, and then they fell on their faces and said, and this is Moses and Aaron, O God, the God of spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and you be angry with all the congregation? This is a verse that sounds familiar. This is something we've actually seen before, and I think speaks to Moses' character. So remember, God himself called Moses the most humble man on earth in one of our previous lessons. Just like Moses did with his brother and sister, Merrell and Aaron, even though this group was opposing him, even though they came up and rose up against Moses, God was willing to strike them down because what they were really doing was coming up against God, not against Moses. Who's the one that ends up pleading their case? Moses, right? He is the most humble man on earth. So God's ready to strike these people down. He's ready to kill them right there. And Moses and Aaron both end up falling down on their knees and pleading to God, please save these people. Basically pointing out that I think they're saying Korah probably is the leader of them. Korah is the one that caused all this. He's the one that caused all this, these people to come up against you. So what are the lessons we can take away from this morning's passage? There's two that I pulled out. The first one is the one that we're just now talking about, forgiveness. Moses, we saw, was not only a man of humility, he was a man of forgiveness. The Israelites opposed him on and off for the whole time that they were in the wilderness, the whole 40 years that they traveled through the wilderness. They opposed Moses one way or another. So in the New Testament, we see when Peter asked Jesus himself in Matthew chapter 18, how many times should I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Peter suggests that the right number might be what? 7. Peter says 7. Is it 7? Should I forgive them 7 times? Is that enough? 7 being the perfect number. He comes to Jesus thinking he knows what he's talking about. And what is Jesus' response? 70 times 7, or 77, depending on your translation. Way, way more than that. So Peter, the first person to ever preach the gospel message, suggested 7 times. Jesus said, no, it's way more than that. Do you think Moses forgave the Israelites more than 7 times? Way more than 7 times, didn't he? Probably too many to count. So even back then, before Jesus was on the face of the earth, Moses had that attitude, that trait of forgiveness. He was a humble man, he was a forgiving man. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32, it says, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you." So just as Moses had compassion on his friends and family here in this example, the New Testament gives us instructions as Christians today to have compassion on those that sin against us, forgiving them just as God forgave us through Christ. So we're supposed to have that same mindset that Moses had. We're supposed to be humble. We're supposed to be forgiving to those around us, to those who come up against us, knowing that we ourselves have been forgiven in Christ. So the first lesson we take away is about forgiveness. Anybody have anything else on that one before we move on? Any thoughts? The second one is about greed and contentment. In the passage we read this morning, basically Moses addresses the Levites, and he talks to the Levites about, don't you have enough? Don't you realize what God's done for you? So greed is defined as an intense and selfish desire for something, especially wealth, power, or food. So in our lesson today, Moses points out, to a majority of the rebels at least, that they're already called out. They're already special. God's already made them set apart from everybody else. So the 12 tribes of Israel, they are basically the only ones that are religious and political leaders that are called out by God. And yet they still wanted more power, more fame. They still wanted to be greater in the eyes of their peers. They had an intense desire for more power. So greed, I think, is a lot like an appetite. This is one of the first lessons I did about appetites. Greed's a lot like an appetite. An appetite is never fully and finally satisfied. Think about hunger when you're hungry. How many times have you finished a big, huge meal and you got done and you just thought, I just couldn't eat anymore. And then 2 hours later, you're at the refrigerator or the freezer, if it's in my case, looking for ice cream or Little Debbie's or something like that. Greed is the same way. You get something, you get one thing, you get a little bit and you want a little bit more. You want a little bit more. It's never fully and finally satisfied. So if you're someone that's struggling with greed, you're thinking that there's always going to be something or someone out there that can fully and finally satisfy you. You spend way too much of your time and money or effort, just like the Israelites did, making really, really poor decisions because of this selfish desire that you have to have more, whether it's money, power, things, people. If you want more than what your spouse has at home, a lot of people go out and cheat on their spouse because they want more. And what they find out is it's not always better, right? So greed is a powerful thing. Appetites are powerful things. So the Israelites in this lesson were looking for that one thing. They were focused on the land flowing with milk and honey to satisfy that craving that they had, that intense desire. God promised it to them, but what was the problem? They weren't patient, right? They weren't patient for it. They wouldn't wait for it. They wanted to have it now. They didn't want to have it later. So even though God continued to save them with miracle after miracle after miracle, just like the Tennessee Vols, they weren't satisfied. They never could get enough power. They never could get enough good things. They were looking forward to this land of milk and honey and didn't think about, this food that just rained down from heaven. When has that ever happened before in the history of mankind? They didn't think about the Red Sea, that the sea parted completely and let them walk across on dry land and engulfed the whole army behind them, the Egyptian army behind them. They were consistently looking forward to what they had ahead of them and were never content with what they had. So that was Moses' response to the Levites in this lesson. He said, you need to be content with what you have. You need to be content with what God has called you to be. The next verse I want to look at is in Colossians chapter 3. Verse 5. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desire, and greed, which is idolatry. So this verse tells us greed is idolatry. It tells us it's more than just an intense desire to want more. It tells us that greed is idolatry. It's putting things before God. And that's what the Israelites were doing in our lesson. They were putting this power, they were putting this land that they were waiting on ahead of their desire to serve God and to love God. And if you flip over to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4, I'm going to read verse 4 and then skip down to verse 10. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. And in verse 10, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you have been concerned, but you have no opportunity to show it. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content with whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. So Paul talks in this passage about being content. He talks about being content. He's lived in both. He's lived in wealth. He's had plenty of food, plenty of things, plenty of power before he converted over to Christ, to being hungry, not having any power on this earth, although he did have power from God. So he's content in any situation. This was a lesson that I had to learn personally at work, kind of the hard way, about being content. So probably 4 or 5 years ago, one of the jobs that I moved into a group where I was probably the youngest person by at least 20 years. So I was working with a lot of people that were older than me, and obviously I felt at times that I was probably doing quite a bit more than they were. But I knew that these people were making a whole lot more money than me, even though I was probably doing more than they were. So I had to very quickly just come to grips with the fact that that's just not how it works. I just be content with where I'm at. I've been blessed to be in the job that I'm in. I'm glad to be here, and I'll do whatever I need to do. So that was something for me, just a personal example of learning contentment, I guess, the hard way. So how do we fix this issue? How do we become content as Christians? If you go back to the definition of greed that we talked about, it's an intense and selfish desire for something. So y'all are all going to learn my favorite verses before too long, because I repeat them a lot up here. One of them is Mark chapter 12, verses 29 through 21, the greatest commandment. So Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. And then what was the second one? Love your neighbor as yourself. So the greatest commandment, the greatest 2 commandments, really have nothing to do with you. The greatest commandments are all about how you deal with others. First of all, God. You got to put God first. You got to put God first, and then you put others first. And that's how you start with being content. You're not thinking about selfishly what I want. If you're serving God, and loving others and serving others, then you're not going to have time to think about all the selfish things that you might want. Anybody have anything else on that point before I move on? Just wanted to end with one quote as I was researching. I don't even know who to attribute it to, but I like the way that it was worded. It says, when I come into a relationship with God through His Son, Jesus Christ, I understand whose I am and what I have. A lack of contentment causes me to look horizontally at what others have, so I am never satisfied. Contentment invites me to look vertically at God. When I look in His direction, regardless of my possessions, or lack of status, or lack of whatever, I know that He's enough. That's all I have for this lesson. The book splits the lesson on Korah's opposition into 2 lessons, so we can't really talk about the repercussions of what they did. We'll talk about that next week. Does anybody else have anything to add this week, this lesson? other thoughts? Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father God, we thank you so much for your word, Lord. We thank you for the examples from your people of long ago, God, that we can look back at and we can study. We can see that you are consistently the same God back then that you are today, God. We thank you for the New Testament, Lord, that bridges the gap between us and them. We thank you for Jesus, for him coming and dying for our sins on the cross, Lord. We thank you for the direction that you've given us in your word. We pray that as we study your word, Lord, that we will look at it with an open heart and an open mind. Pray that we will learn both from your word and learn from one another. Father, as we go into this hour of worship, we pray that you will remove all the worldly things from our mind, God. Help us to focus on you as we come before you for worship. We ask this in Christ's name.